Welcome, families, to Nature Storytime at the Harvard Museums of Science and Culture. If you've attended our program before, welcome back. If this is your first time, we're glad you're here. We hope this program engages everyone in your family, from the little kids to the grown-ups. We read picture books that you might find at your local library or at school that connect to something in the museum. First, we'll read the story, then look closely at some science specimens from the teaching collection of the museum. We hope you enjoyed today's story. Hello and welcome to Nature Storytime. My name is Carol. I'm so glad you're here today. We have a story about dogs. Does anybody have a dog at home? Oh, that's great. Maybe you have a dog that looks something like this, or another breed of dog. They're large, they're very small, but they're all dogs. And you know, dogs are really good at doing some things. Well, they wag their tails really well when they're happy, and they have great senses of hearing and sight and smell. Sometimes they're called man's best friend. I think human's best friend is even better. So today we're going to learn about how dogs came to be with the story, The First Dog, written by Jan Brett and published by G.P. Putnam's Sons, an imprint of Penguin Group. The First Dog by Jan Brett. Before we open the book to read the story, let's take a look at the cover and see what we can notice. Well, there's an animal on the cover. Is it a dog? It's actually supposed to be a wolf. In this case, a paleo wolf from long, long ago. Dogs did descend from wolves, but we're going to find out about the first dog. And so we're going to go back to the time of the end of the Ice Age. We also know this story takes place a long time ago if we look at the other animals in the picture. Here we have a woolly mammoth. We don't have them today. And here we have a woolly rhino. Well, we do have rhinoceros today, but not woolly ones. At one time, they lived in very cold climates. We can also see glaciers, so ice that's retreating. The first dog. Whoa, on this page I see a lot of wolves howling. And I also can see some stone tools and some cave paintings. So I know that we are a long time ago. Imagine what it would have been like. It was cold, there was ice retreating, and modern humans were in situations where they might have encountered wild animals more than we do today. Here we have a little boy, the protagonist of our story, Kip. He's a cave boy, and he's roasting woolly rhino ribs over a fire and then putting them in his bag to take with him to have as a snack. We see Kip wearing clothes made of animal skins and carrying a spear with a stone tip in it, and even some woolly rhinos back here and ice in the background. So let's take ourselves far back in time for our story. Long, long ago, in the great days of the Pleistocene, Kip the cave boy bounded down the trail on his way home. He avoided the aurochs and the cave bears and the megaceros. He evaded the woolly rhinoceros, the wild horse, and the mighty mammoth. But he was getting tired and hungry, and he was still a long way from home. What do you think he's going to do next? What would you do? He marched on until he saw a great rock. It was a good place to stop and rest. Kip reached into his bag for a woolly rhino rib, still sweet and smoky from the fire. Suddenly, up popped Paleo Wolf looking for leftovers. Wolf's nose began to twitch and sniff. He sniffed to the left and he sniffed to the right. "What are you doing?" teased Kip. "What can you smell in this emptiness?" Paleo Wolf held his snout up high in the air, and with his keen nose he could smell a rain cloud across the valley, the track of a tiny toad, and the pelt of a prying pachyderm. But most of all, he could smell roasted woolly rhino bones, and he gave a hungry whine. You guys want to whine with me? "Pooh," said Kip, "I can't smell anything but my dinner, and it's all for me." And he turned his back on the wolf. But Paleo Wolf had already hurried away, and when Kip saw the reason why, he was just able to get away in time. Soon Kip was back on the homeward trail. He walked on and on until he spied a cave. It was a fine place to stop and rest, and he thought about another rhino rib, still crackly and crunchy from the fire. Up popped Paleo Wolf, looking for leftovers. Wolf's ears began to turn and dip. He listened to the left and he listened to the right. "What are you doing?" mocked Kip, taking a big bite. "What can you hear in this silence?" Wolf cocked his head, and with his fine canine ears, he could hear a fish rise in the river, a leaf fall, and the soft pant, pant, pant of a cave bear. What does pant mean? Like, but most of all, he could hear the snap of woolly rhino bones, still crisp from the fire, and he gave a pleading howl. You want to howl with me? "Ow! Ow!" "Pooh," said Kip, "I can't hear anything except my teeth crunching on these very tasty bones." And he threw a clump of moss at Paleo Wolf. But Paleo Wolf had already hurried away, and when Kip saw the reason why, Cave Bear, he was just able to get away in time. You see the cubs in the cave? Soon Kip was back on the homeward trail, more footsore and weary than ever. He trudged on and on until he saw a big tree. It was just the place to stop and rest. He climbed the tree and reached for a woolly rhino rib, still pearly and greasy from the fire. Up popped Paleo Wolf, looking for leftovers. Wolf's eyes began to sparkle and dance, and he looked to the left and he looked to the right. "What are you doing?" jeered Kip. "What can you see in this darkness?" Wolf's eyes glowed. With his sharp eyes, he could see the shimmer of a distant drop of dew, a mouse scurrying far away, and a feline sleeping high above. But most of all, he could see a pearly, greasy morsel of rhino bone shining in the moonlight, and he licked his chops. "Pooh," said Kip, "I can't see anything, except of course my roasted, toasted, crunchy, crispy, pearly, greasy, woolly rhino rib. And you won't be tasting that, because I want it all to myself." And then Kip yelled, "Shoo!" as loud as he could. The yell resounded up and down the tree. It woke every living thing around. Instantly, Paleowolf's nose wrinkled and his ears went back, and his eyes narrowed and his tail stood out. He looked so terrible that Kip threw the whole bag of rhino ribs down from the tree. "Help yourself, Wolfie!" But Paleowolf did not care about dinner now. His mane bristled and ridged down his back. A long growl shook from his throat. It was his last warning. Kip opened his eyes very wide, and he looked all around, but he could not smell or hear or see anything. And he whispered, "What do you know, wise wolf?" But Paleowolf was gone. "There is great danger here," thought Kip. "I must disappear too." And he shrank into the leafy branches and made himself very small. What do you think is the danger? Just in time, for high in the tree was the most fearsome of creatures, the saber-toothed cat. She crouched, she snarled, "Rawr," and then she sprang. She hurtled past Kip, hidden in the leaves, and she pounced on the pile of woolly rhino bones below. All that night, as he sat in the tree, Kip thought and thought. He shivered over Paleowolf's last warning. It had not been 1 second too soon. The next morning, Kip climbed down, and there was Paleowolf, looking for leftovers. Together, they looked at the spot where the bones had been, and they were very gloomy. Finally, Kip made a speech. He said, "Wolfie, if you will use your keen nose and your fine ears and your sharp eyes to keep me from being eaten up, I promise to share with you all of the woolly rhino ribs and even mammoth meat that I cook over my fire." Paleowolf barked, "Oof," meaning yes, and then he wagged his tail, the very first wolf to do so. When Kip saw that, he cried, "And I will call you Dog," which means one who wags his tail. Then Kip the cave boy and the very first dog went on home. I hope you enjoyed that story. We don't know for sure how it was that the first wolf was tamed and became a dog, but we do know that wolves and dogs are very closely related. In fact, wolves and dogs and coyotes are all part of the group of Canidae. Now, the wolves that are ancestral to our dogs today are now extinct, but we know that there are other wolves in the world, and in fact, wolves used to be living in New England. Here we can see one. Now there are wolves in other parts of the world. Let's take a look at a wolf's skull and notice its teeth. This is a skull of a gray wolf, and we can see that it has really strong teeth. It has fangs. It also has carnassials that are important for cutting the meat that they would eat. Let's also see the nose. It's very long, and that they're very good at smelling. And big eyes. Here's where the ears would be. So wolves have those wonderful skills of abilities of sight and hearing and smell that were in our story. Here's some fur from a gray wolf. Notice it's not gray, but gray wolves have different patterns and different colors. Do you think it's soft? It's actually a little bit scratchy. The Paleo wolf is a lot bigger than the modern wolf that we have today. And if you would like to see a skeleton, a fossil of the dire wolf, take a look when you come inside the museum. Here we have the dire wolf skeleton, and across from it is a saber-toothed cat skeleton. And you can see the saber-tooth is very large, and that's why in our story, Paleo wolf was afraid of the saber-tooth. So I hope you enjoyed that story today, and I look forward to seeing you again. Bye.